The purpose of this video is to show you how one piece of feedback can be delivered through three different mediums. The mediums we'll be focusing on for our feedback, our different forms of feedback, are text, audio and video. This will allow us to see how they can be applied to enhancing student feedback. So let's begin with looking at text. We're now looking at text feedback, and for the purposes of this video we have a narrative. The narrative is that all the feedback, it will be the same piece of feedback we'll be looking at just from three different points of view, and the feedback relates to our digital literacy quiz. I'll be giving feedback for a student who hasn't done too well. That student is me, unfortunately. And what we'll now do is we'll just have a brief look at how text feedback can be added. The feedback we'll be focusing on is the feedback within the comments and feedback section here. So what I'd like to do in a few moments is pause this video and just look at the text on screen briefly, and then we'll come back to analyse this shortly. Okay, so I'm assuming you've had time to look at the text feedback. What you'll notice first off is the message here can sound a bit abrupt. This is because sometimes when you're using text, you'll notice that the message can get lost, and of course the tone of the message, this gets lost entirely. And also as well, you'll notice for all we have 4 questions correct and 6 questions wrong, doesn't actually tie up to the questions. In other words, there's no feedback provided for the student, so the student doesn't know why this question was incorrect, etc. So that's another that is a limitation of text feedback, along with, as you can see, if you were to give a detailed feedback, you need to type a lot more text within the box here to give the student that proper support. So now that we've reviewed text feedback, we'll go on and look at audio feedback. We're going to look at the same piece of feedback we viewed in our previous section, and within the text feedback I mentioned tone a lot and the message getting lost. Well, what I'd like to do now is I'm going to play you this feedback that's on screen here, the feedback that's within the comments and feedback section, narrated by me, but in 2 distinct different tones. Now there's a wee gap between the 2 different recordings, so please do allow a moment or 2. I'll now play the recordings. Student, first of all, I don't want you to take this personally, but you're not digital literate, are you? You were able to answer some of the questions correctly, but I would have expected a better result from you. Are you disappointed in your performance? Good point. You got 4 questions correct. Bad point. You got 6 questions wrong. So you really need to work on improving your knowledge to get a better score in next week's test. And quite frankly, I'm not sure you can even do this. Please use my comments as they're intended. Try not to get too annoyed. Just annoyed enough to prove me wrong next week. Hi there, Greg. First of all, I don't want you to take this personally, but you're not digital literate, are you? You were able to answer some of the questions correctly, but I would have expected a better result from you. Are you disappointed in your performance? Your good points were you got 4 questions correct. The bad point, unfortunately, is you got 6 questions wrong, so you really need to work on improving your knowledge to get a better score in next week's test. And quite frankly, I'm not sure you can do this, but please use my comments as they're intended. Try not to get too annoyed. Just annoyed enough to prove me wrong next week. Okay, so we've listened to our 2 recordings of the audio feedback. Obviously the first recording was quite negative in tone, quite sarcastic, quite dismissive. However, the second recording, as you heard, was more sympathetic, and therefore the tone was entirely different. And as I mentioned earlier on in the text feedback section, the meaning of it doesn't get lost. You can understand how the student might hear that first voice in their head when looking at the text feedback. It sounds very dismissive, quite sarcastic. So we've heard how the tone of your delivery can make a difference in audio feedback, and also the other factor you have to keep in mind as well is to be descriptive within your feedback as well. So for example, you may say question 4 incorrect. You may want to look at the associated reading, because you're going to have to describe where you're referring to within the page or submission you're looking at. So we'll now move on to video feedback. We're now looking at our same piece of feedback again, however this will be done from a video perspective. And video has the advantage of course, you have the audio narration, you have the tone that can be conveyed through the audio, but you also have the advantage of you can highlight areas on screen as well, and the student will of course see this. So this really does contextualise the feedback and enable the student to see what specific area you're referring to. So we've now looked at the three types of feedback. What would be good to do is go to the applicable forum and post your thoughts on these three types of feedback and any other feedback you may have come across as well. For example, would you consider gamification of feedback as well? So there's lots still to discuss, and please view the associated reading as well. Thanks again for watching the video.